I have been designing knitting patterns since probably about 2005, 2006. I had my first pattern published by a magazine in 2007, but I started self-publishing patterns before then. I have been published by knitting magazines in the UK, in the US, and in Germany, believe it or not. I think it was a pattern I'd published for, or 2 or 3 patterns I published for British magazines that were translated to Germany for a German magazine. And then there was a yarn company I used to design for. I think they put a couple of my patterns that I designed for them into German magazine, which I cannot remember what it's called. I have designed for a number of yarn companies, both here in the UK and in the US. I've done some designs for yarn companies through an American publisher. I've contributed to several books by an American publisher and by a British publisher. I've written my own books, 2 of them, and I have designed for my own pattern line. So I've done quite a lot of pattern writing, pattern designing over the years. I have several hundred designs listed on my Ravelry design page. And there's a lot of designs I've designed for magazines and yarn companies that are not listed on Ravelry because I just didn't get around to it at the time. So I know that kind of design profile is not complete, but I have several hundred designs there. So I've got quite a lot of experience in the knitting pattern world. So today I thought I would talk about the difference between designing for magazines and yarn companies and for myself. If you're new here, my name is Anniken. I design knitting patterns, I teach knitting workshops online and in person, and I sell yarn through my website yarnaddict.co.uk. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed yet, please consider subscribing. Okay, so I did a video last year where I talked about how I got started knitting and designing. So if you're interested in that and you didn't watch it, or you found me more recently, I will link that video at the end of this video and also below. So you can find all the links in the description box below. So I have quite a wide-ranging experience. I started designing self-published patterns, as in I decided I was going to try and write up what I was designing. I never really liked following other people's knitting patterns. I don't like following other people's instructions or recipes when it comes to cooking or knitting patterns or instructions for flat pack furniture. I like to just kind of wing it. So I started this knitting stuff without a pattern, and I decided I would try and write it down. Now, at the time, I was struggling to understand English knitting patterns, so trying to write it up was quite a challenge. And obviously, because I started in like 2005, 2006, there wasn't the information there is now. So I just gave it a go, and my first few patterns were probably pretty awful, and they were never listed online. And I would not share them now because they are really, really bad. But I got started, and then I met somebody local who designed for knitting magazines, and she put me in touch with some knitting magazines. And when I started designing for knitting magazines, things became a bit more organized, and I got a bit more focused on what I was doing. So let's talk about designing for a third-party publisher first. So that includes magazines, publishers who publish books and kind of pattern collections for yarn companies, yarn shops, anything like that. I've designed for all of those different categories. So when you design for somebody else, they will usually send you some kind of proposal. So they will send you, it might just be an email saying, I'm looking for a shawl for this issue. Can you design something for me? Or it might be a magazine sending out a formal proposal to all their designers who are on their mailing list, saying for issue X, we are looking for these types of designs. Here are the mood boards. These are the color stories. These are the type of yarns we'd like. It just varies from magazine to magazine, from yarn company to yarn company, how formal that process is. I will then come up with a submission design and submit that to the magazine. I was asked to design a wedding shawl for the lovely Amy, who I met through a yarn shop where I was teaching in north of Birmingham. She went on to own a yarn shop for a while in the same area, and I met her through one of my workshops and we got on really well. And then when she got married a few years ago, she asked me to design a wedding shawl for her. And I came up with 2 or 3 ideas that I sent her, and then she decided which one she preferred. And she knitted the sample. I've never actually knitted that shawl. I knitted the swatch, she knitted her own sample, and then she allowed me to use her wedding photos as my official pattern photos, which I was really excited about because I'd always wanted to design a wedding shawl and have it modeled by an actual bride, which, unless it was like one of my daughters or something, and neither of them have gotten married yet, it's a difficult thing to do because, I felt like friends' daughters getting married, I couldn't sort of say, by the way, can you just model a shawl for me? So when Amy asked me to design her wedding shawl for her, I had a chance to get a proper wedding shawl modeled by a proper bride. She had already chosen the yarn, which she had dyed by Roses Moments, who's a British indie dyer. And I actually do have my own sample of that shawl now, but one of my sample knitters knitted it. So designing for other people can be somebody contacting you to do a one-off commission to designing for magazines and yarn companies. But all of these things will start with some kind of idea or proposal or request. And then I will come up with an idea. So my proposal will include a swatch showing the stitch patterns, possibly showing what the yarn would look like, especially if it's like a textured or more kind of unusual yarn. Maybe showing the colors I'm thinking about. I will include a sketch showing the design on a person, on a human form. Unless it's an accessory, I tend to only sketch designs when it's a garment because I'm not very good at sketching. Like a line drawing of the shape is helpful, I will do that. But I don't usually draw sketches for accessories just because I'm not very good at sketching. Sketching is my huge weak point when it comes to designing knitting patterns. I will also usually do like a line drawing of the design and include the measurements for the sample size. And then I will do a description. So 1 or 2 paragraphs describing the design, any construction methods. So if I'm knitting a garment, for example, I will say this garment is worked from the bottom up in the round to the underarms. Front and back are then worked separately to the shoulders, which are joined using a 3-needle cast off. Stitches are picked up around the armhole and short row, and the sleeve caps are shaped by working short rows back and forth. The sleeves will then be worked in the round from the top down. Stitches will be picked up for the neck edging and worked at the end. The sweater will feature a lace, all over lace pattern. The sleeves will be stocking stitch and be 3/4 length. It will be a V-neck neckline or whatever. I will just kind of describe the garment. I may also describe this will be perfect for a weekend, relaxing, shopping, or this is more formal or whatever. I would just kind of describe it and trying to give the editor a feel for what I'm designing and any important details that I think they need to know, like sleeve length. This is a crop garment, this is a hip length garment, whatever. I will also do a description about the yarn. So I will say which yarn I've swatched in, which yarn weight I think this is suitable for. So 4-ply, DK, whatever. What kind of yarn? Does this need a smooth yarn, a fuzzy yarn? Is it mohair? Is it alpaca? What kind of fiber? Is it best in cotton? Does it matter? As long as it's a smooth yarn, can it be a blend of yarns? What yarn weight and how much yarn is needed for the design in the yarn weight I recommend. And then I will put all that together into an A4 document. Try and keep it to 1 page because most editors want it on 1 page. And then I will send it off and they will commission it. And I will then design the patterns, knit a sample, write the pattern. And so the way I normally do it is I write the pattern in the sample size, knit that either myself or have one of my sample knitters knitted, and then block that, take all the final measurements, and then I will write up the other sizes. So I have like a sort of framework pattern from the sample size, and then I will add all the other numbers for the other sizes, because sometimes tension changes slightly in the finished garment compared to your swatch that I use to calculate tension for before I write a garment. Once the garment has been knitted and blocked, sometimes tension can change slightly. So I learned not to grade the whole pattern beforehand because I then waste a lot of time. Having said that, sometimes you come to add all the other sizes and you find that a detail doesn't work in one of the sizes, and then you're a bit stuck. So there are advantages and disadvantages. And then I will send that sample to the magazine. They will photograph it. I'll write the pattern. I'll send the pattern to the magazine. They will edit it. They'll get back to me if they have any questions about the sample or about the pattern. And then it will eventually be published and hopefully be knitted by lots of knitters. So that's how that process works. Now the restrictions on that is that if I say I'm going to design a sweater using 4-ply yarn with an all over lace pattern with a 3/4 length sleeve, hip length, and with a V-neck, I had to produce that, and I have to make sure that that works across a range of sizes. So if I choose to have a stitch pattern that's say 20 stitches, which is quite big, in DK yarn, so that would be quite a wide pattern repeat, and is an all over stitch pattern, and I find that I can't make that work across the size range that the magazine or yarn company wants, then I've got problems. So if it's an all over pattern, I've learned to keep the stitch pattern as small as possible. Thinner yarn, the more leeway I've got and the more flexibility I've got. If I have a stitch pattern that has a larger pattern repeat, then I will normally not include it on the whole sweater. So it might just be a panel on one half up the center or whatever, because then it gives me like plain areas of say stocking stitch to play with to adjust the stitch count for the different sizes. So there's certain things I've learned over the years. Basically, I have to supply what I've said I'm going to design. And if there are any big changes from that, if I decide that this design won't work with a certain element of what I'm designing, like I decide that the yarn isn't suitable for part of a design element of the design I'm creating, I have to either tell the magazine that beforehand and say, look, I've come across this problem, can I change it to this? There have been times when I've come across problems and I've thought, I don't think this design works and I just want to scrap it, and I can't scrap it, so I just have to make it work. That has happened. And I have to kind of provide what I said I'm going to provide, because my proposal and the magazine or yarn company's acceptance and commissioning that proposal is basically a contract between us, whether it's a written contract or not. It is a contract, and I have to supply what I said I'm going to supply at the time I said I'm going to supply it. So I don't have a lot of flexibility. So for example, I designed a pattern quite a few years ago now for a magazine, and it was knitted all in one piece. I knitted a lot of it on holiday, some of it in the car driving to Scotland from where I live in Cornwall. So it's a long drive. And it was all knitted in one piece. So when I came home and I blocked it, I realized that in the middle of the front, kind of like below the bust, between the bust and the waist, I'd made a mistake. Quite a big mistake. I'd like skipped half a pattern repeat or something. But the only way I could fix that was because it was knitted all in one piece from the bottom up, and then stitches picked up with the sleeves, so I would knitted top down. So the only way I could fix it really was to re-knit half the sweater plus both sleeves, which I didn't have time to do because I wouldn't be able to meet my deadline, because that would take a long time. So I just sent it in and I pretended I hadn't noticed it. And the editor never said anything to me, so I don't know whether she didn't notice it or whether it was just covered up in photography. I never actually got a copy of that magazine, so I forgot that when he was being published, and I never got a copy of the magazine, so I never actually saw the finished photographs. Even whether they published it, I have no idea. I got paid for it. The pattern didn't have the mistake, but the sample did. So that's the kind of embarrassing thing where I would have to re-knit a whole sample, which I just don't have time to do. If I decide that something doesn't work, if it's a small detail, I might be able to change it, but if it's a big detail, then I have to seriously think about it. So the question or the comment on one of my YouTube videos that prompted this video was somebody commenting on a cardigan I'm knitting at the moment. I don't know how long, in how many weeks this video will be out. I'm filming this in the middle of April, or so, no, 7th of April, but it may not be out for at least 3 to 4 weeks. So hopefully by then I will have finished the cardigan I'm working on. But I'm working on the cardigan with yarn by Pixie Yarns, and I'm using a combination of a couple of, I started off with 200-gram skeins in 2 different colors and 3 or 4 sets of mini skeins in 20 grams in each color. And I got to kind of, it's knitted from the top down. I got to like the bottom part of it, from like the waist down, I guess. And the colors I had chosen to use I wasn't happy with, and I'd ordered another color, and I decided to rip out a big chunk to re-knit it in the new color. I then also went on to pick up stitches for the button band, which didn't work. It was slightly kind of frilly, so I had to rip that out and re-knit it. I'm now actually considering whether the stitches I picked up for the sleeves are going to work, whether I picked up too many stitches, and whether I'm going to have to rip out the sleeve. I haven't done more than about that, so not very much. So there's been a few things in that sweater that I've had to rip out and start again. And the commenter basically said, I'm something along the lines of, I'm amazed that you would go to this trouble to make sure the garment is perfect, or something along those lines. And I can do that because it's self-published and I'm designing it for me. If I was designing this for a magazine, I couldn't do, probably not even rip out the section I did. One thing, I would have had the yarn I said I was going to use. I would submit a design based on using a certain yarn and certain colors, and I would have to use that. And I wouldn't have the luxury of changing my mind about the yarn halfway through. Secondly, I wouldn't have had time to rip out a big section unless I'd made a mistake and I had to. And that has happened before, where I've had to rip out a big section because I made a mistake and I then have to make sure I can finish it in time. So I probably wouldn't have ripped out that section because I would have been conscious of the deadline and needing to finish it. Also, knitting stuff for myself that I'm primarily designing because I want to wear it. If you're going to knit stuff for yourself, whether you're designing something for yourself, whether you're knitting a pattern by somebody else, if you are knitting something for yourself, you want it to be perfect for you, or as perfect as you can get it for yourself. So you want to make sure that it will fit you, and if and that you're happy with it. There's no point if you start knitting a garment for yourself and you decide there's something about the garment you're not happy with, whether it's the fit, the design, the stitch pattern, a design element, or the yarn, there's no point finishing it just for the sake of finishing it if you know you don't like it and you're never going to wear it. And that's the same for me. So I want to make sure I got it right because I want to be able to wear this when I finish it, because I'm not small, so knitting something in my size takes a long time. And also I have paid for all the yarn, and that wasn't cheap because it's hand dyed, so I want to make sure that I like it and I will wear it. I did buy the yarn over a period of a year, so it doesn't, actually more than that, year and a half, so it doesn't feel like it's cost me a lot because I didn't pay for all the yarn in one go. So that definitely helps. But if I design for magazines, I wouldn't have the luxury of redoing things and ripping a big section out just because of time. I wouldn't have the time to do that. If I'm designing for a yarn company, I can't necessarily change my mind about what yarn to use because they need X number of designs in a particular yarn. So just looking at one of the yarns lying on my desk, which I picked up yesterday, this is West Yorkshire Spinners Elements DK. You know, if they decided that they want 5 designs using this yarn, they have to have 5 designs using this yarn. So even if I decide that another yarn from West Yorkshire Spinners, like Exquisite 4-ply, for example, is better, I can't change yarns unless I say to them, this design isn't going to work and I don't want to do it. Can we cancel the contract? But I would be very reluctant to do that unless I really, really felt like something really wasn't going to work and it wouldn't be in my best interest to finish it. If I design knitting patterns for my own pattern line, so not specifically things for me to wear, for example, this poncho thing I'm wearing now, I designed this to make sure it fits me, and I have worn it a number of times, but I mainly designed it because I wanted a pattern that looked like this because I thought it would be popular. If I design a shawl, like I used to have a lace shawl club, and if I designed a shawl for that shawl club, the main priority of that design was to design something that would go with the yarn I'd chosen for that month. And when I first started my lace club, I used to do hand-dyed yarn, and then I stopped doing hand-dyed yarn and changed to using commercial yarn. So I had to pick out the yarn and design something that would go with that yarn and that hopefully people would like. And over the course of the club, I used to do sign-ups for I think 3 months at a time. And I think eventually I actually went every other month. So you signed up for 3 months, but it was every other month. So it was really over a 6 month period. And I would have to make sure that I didn't do the same shawl shapes. So if people signed up for 3 months, they didn't want to do 3 rectangular shawls in a row. So I might do a rectangular, might do a crescent, might do a rectangle, might do a circular, whatever. I had to make sure there was a variety. And that's the thing, when I design for my own pattern line, I have to make sure there's a variety of the patterns I publish. So originally I mainly designed lace patterns. Now I do other things. So now I try and be more cautious about alternating between lace, brioche and colorwork, because that tends to be what I design. Last year I did like 3 brioche cowls in a row. That's not a good idea, but that was what I was into knitting at the time. So I have to kind of make sure, mix in some garments. I haven't done a lot of self-published garments because they take so much time and they cost a lot of money to tech edit and publish. But going forward, I'd like to mix in garments, small accessories, shawls, um, doing a bit of color work, a bit of brioche, a bit of lace, and alternate more between those different things that I like designing. So there are things I need to think about, but I can basically decide, right, I fancy knitting a lace shawl next. So I'm going to design a knit a lace shawl and publish the pattern when it's ready. Some designers will probably plan a few months in advance, or maybe a year in advance, or some designers might do like a design schedule where they say, right, in January, I'm going to publish a sweater. In February, I'm going to publish a scarf. In March, I'm going to publish a more spring-like sweater. In April, I'm going to publish a shawl. In May, I'm going to publish a summer t-shirt. In June, I'm going to publish a pair of socks. They may have this planned out a long time in advance. I don't do that because my main job is designing for magazines and yarn companies. I haven't done any work for yarn companies for a while now, but because I've been so busy doing stuff for magazines. Um, Actually, it's probably only about a year since I last had my designs published by yarn companies. It's not that long ago. But I juggle, if a yarn company came to me and said, can you design some patterns? We'd like them ready for the autumn. I would say yes. This is what I got time to do and deadline I can do them for. My main job is designing for magazines and yarn companies and teaching workshops. That takes up most of my time. And any self-published patterns has to fit in between that. And the reason for that is if you self-publish patterns, it's very difficult to know how much money you're going to make. So I have to pay for the yarn. I have to obviously either pay a sample knitter or knit it myself, which takes hours. I have to write up the pattern. I have to send it to my tech editor. I have to pay my tech editor. I have to do photographs and layout and publish that pattern. That takes a lot of time. And I mean, the only outgoings I have, if we're not talking about paying myself, would be paying for the yarn, paying for my sample knitter if I use one, and paying for the tech editor. Those are things I have to cover. And a lot of self-published patterns don't actually sell that much unless you're a huge designer like Stephen West, Joji Locatelli, Andrea Mowry, for example. They're probably 3 of the biggest designers now. Petite Knits. I saw on Instagram the other day that she's now got 1 million followers on Instagram or something. She employs several people in her office. She has office outside her house. This office is in my house. Is one of the bare bedrooms in my house. She has an office outside of her house. She employs several people. If you got that kind of business, you're probably planning out your pattern release schedule ahead of time. But because self-publishing patterns isn't my main thing, it fits in with everything else I do, which is why I don't plan it as carefully as what other designers might do. As the self-published designers, you need to make sure that you release patterns regularly. There was a couple of years, a few years ago, where I tried to really focus on self-published designs, and I found that the more often I published patterns, the more I sold. Not just of the new pattern, but if I publish a new pattern, my older patterns will sell more as well. If I haven't published for a pattern for a while, my sales drop significantly. And then if I publish a pattern, it will boost not just the new pattern, but old patterns as well. So this year I've been really bad. I have not self-published many patterns at all this year. Have I self-published anything this year so far? I'm not sure. I have knitted a few things that I haven't published yet. I probably have published a couple of things this year, but my self-publishing output in the last couple of years have been very, very low, mainly because I've done so much work for magazines and I've taught so many workshops. I haven't had time to focus too much on self-publishing patterns, which is at the moment I have at least 2 cowls, 3 garments, and a shawl, 2 shawls maybe, that are in the pipeline and that will be published hopefully this year. Okay, let's finish it there. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, let me know, but just trying to highlight some of the differences between designing for a magazine and designing for yourself. So designing for magazines is a more structured, and I have to provide what I've said I'm going to provide. Designing for myself and my own pattern line is a bit more relaxed. I can basically do what I want and change my mind. Even if I decided that in May I was going to publish a summer t-shirt and I changed my mind about that, unless I've committed to do a collaboration with somebody and using their yarn, I can change my mind. You can't really do that when you design for somebody else. So I hope you enjoyed today's video and it's given you a bit more of an insight into being a designer in 2024. Things have changed a lot since I started in 2005, 2006. But I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please consider subscribing. I will put links to anything I've talked about below this video, including my social media links and how to sign up to my newsletter. And let me know what you thought of this video in the comments. Leave me any questions you have and I will do my best to answer them, and maybe your comment will spark the topic of a future video. If there's anything you want me specifically to talk about in future videos, do leave that in the comments below as well. Thank you for watching. I will see you next time.